Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Thank you for coming back. I'm so glad that you're here. And I have a guest with me today who you've met before, if you're one of our regulars, Eva Silverfine. Hi, Eva.
Hi there. It's great to be here again. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm so glad you're back. If this is your first time, I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, and I'm author of Getting It Right, Tangled Lives, and Reckonings, which came out this year. And Eva, one of the reasons, well, you're just going to love all of her books. You're going to want to buy all of her books, and she's going to tell us about her latest. So she is author of Elastic Walls. Don't you love these titles? Listen to this next one. How to Bury Your Dog. And then her latest one that just came out, Ephemeral. Say it for me.
Ephemeral Wings.
Ephemeral Wings. Show us.
Oh, the cover.
And I see that, everybody? Isn't that beautiful? That is so lovely. Eva, since it's been about a year or almost since we last spoke and since everybody met you, tell us about your writing life this past year. Kind of what have you been into and up to?
Well, I wish I could say I've been doing a whole lot of writing. That's not exactly the case. As I've told you in the past, I also work as an editor, copy editor of nonfiction primarily. And so I've been doing a lot of editing work. And then when my manuscript for Ephemeral Wings was accepted, I got into that train of production and promotion. And as you know, that can eat up a lot of time. But I did steal a little time this summer and wrote some short stories, which are much easier to work on in a short time frame than a longer work. So my novel that's in progress is still sort of sitting and waiting for me to find a block of time to return to it. And hopefully next year, maybe, I'll get there.
Well, you get a pass because How to Bury Your Dog came out the end of last year, right?
Yes.
And then here is this one out again. So I think you look exceedingly productive. That's what.
Yeah, it's an illusion, but.
So you write in so many different genres, personal narratives, creative nonfiction, flash fiction. One of the things that I've been working on, I'm not good at it yet, but I've been working on flash fiction. I'd love to talk to you about that. Adult novels, YA novels. So how is that different? How do you manage all those shifts in your head, moving from genre to genre?
Well, I don't think they're really very different in terms of process. I mean, everything starts with an idea of some sort, a concept, a character, a character's voice, a fragment of conversation you hear, something that inspires you to the work. And with both my personal narratives and short stories, which I see as very similar and are anywhere from 500 words to 1,500 words, that all gets written out in one sitting. And whereas, something larger obviously does not get written out in one sitting. But after that initial writing or longer writing, it really is an exploration. Even if I start with an idea, especially on the short stuff, is what is it? What is this really about? Mm-hmm. And as I work on it, on the short stuff, I'm really winnowing down to get a really sharp focus, because in that short of a piece, you have to stay focused. And while you're working on it, you may go off on this tangent and that tangent, but as you go back and refine it, you have to make sure that what you have there is in service to a very short story arc, because it is still a story arc. On longer stuff, you're doing the same thing, except you have a lot more room to go off on tangents. I think still those tangents need to serve the story as a whole. So it needs to give you more understanding about the character, or about the plot, or about the setting, or the theme. And so, and sometimes I think I winnow down too much, even when I'm writing something long, but
is that the editor in you? Is that the editor that
yeah, I think it was, there's good parts of doing that. I think both the science, the background in science and reading a lot of science where things are very to the point, and then editing a lot of science and nonfiction, and then also writing a lot of those the short fiction and the personal narratives. I tend to edit down a lot, and the more challenging thing for me is to, okay, let's hear more about the character.
let's expand
more about what that scene looks like. So that's what I have to work on more. But still a story arc, and what you're writing has to serve that overall story arc. And and if for books, eventually I don't start out with an outline, but eventually I have to outline it, and it's that the whole process of it is different, and going back and editing, it's just a bigger piece of work to deal with.
It is, and it takes more time. It takes a lot of time. I was particularly interested in your take on this about the different genres, more because for the first time I've always written suspense. That's been, short chapters. Every book takes place over 2 weeks' time. And now I am writing historical fiction, and I'm writing for the first time in first person. And so I admire authors who can shift genres and styles so easily, because this is a struggle. I'll tell you that.
Well, that's one of the neat things about the flash fiction is, and I would not touch historical fiction. I love it. I love to read it. I think it takes a real commitment to get all those details right, and that's why I'm not going to touch it. But in the flash, you can play with telling it from different points of view, and so you sort of get to practice those sort of things in a shorter form.
Yeah, you work those muscles. So your latest novel, it's so unique. I read the book cover, and so you just have to tell us about it. You have to tell us about Maggie the Mayfly, and what this story is about.
Okay, so I was joking with a friend recently, and I said I finally published my master's thesis. So as a graduate student, I studied stream ecology, and a big component of the stream are the immature insects that live in it. They develop, they typically have a larval stage in the stream, and then at some point when they become adults, you will see them flying about. And I decided to work on mayflies, I think just because they were very graceful looking, but they're also very poetic. They have a very short lifespan. That's where the ephemeral wings title comes from. Their Latin name is Ephemeroptera, which means ephemeral wings. they typically live for a day or less as adults, but they have this long life in the water that, in the stream or other freshwater body. But besides the biology, as a student, what I began to become interested in were the other students around me and the professors. And I began to see that what people chose to study often reflected aspects of their personality or their perspectives on the world. And so I became as interested in that as the biology itself, that, people do sort of study their influence. It's not totally an objective scientific thing as to what people end up studying. So it was while I was a graduate student that I started writing this book. So it's been around for a long time. And every several years, I pull it out and work on it again. And the latest time I took it out a year or two ago, one of the things I realized was I had to be very careful because it's in a voice of a very naive, hopeful individual. And if I started tweaking it as an adult down the road from where I started writing it, I would change the whole feel of it, the whole tone of it. But it's an allegorical coming of age story, and we're following Maggie, the mayfly, who is searching the stream for the richest of foods with which to nourish her eggs and her flight in the world of air. And the stream provides a wonderful metaphor. She lives in this world that's very physical and deals with, predators and finding food and finding the right habitat. But she yearns for experiencing things that are ethereal or have no body, the things that she sees as belonging to the world of air, non-tangible qualities, things like sincerity and integrity and compassion. So she is very much an idealist, and her quest is really the question in the book is, how do we bring our youthful idealism into adulthood?
With all these predators and all this bad stuff.
With real life,
with real life around us.
Around us.
So, it sounds beautiful. It sounds really, I'm so glad you explained about the biology and why you got interested. I was like, oh my goodness. But that is beautiful. That is a beautiful thing. And did you have something that you wanted your readers to take away from reading? Everybody, this is fiction. If you haven't figured that out, it's not a biology book.
Well, I will say, and this is one thing maybe I should have handled differently, because a few people have said, and it's hard for me because not only do I have a biology background, but I still consort with a lot of biologists. But even though none of the more technical, none of the terms really interfere with the storyline, I know that some people trip up over things that terms that are not in the everyday vernacular. And I maybe should have really tried to remove more of that in one way or another for people who would be uncomfortable with that. But in terms of people, what I would want people to get out of it, well, on one level, I guess maybe an appreciation that there's this complex community that lives in our water body, and maybe it will inspire some young biologist, or but hopefully inspire people to have a little bit more respect and care of all of our freshwater systems, which we sometimes take for granted and are really
And
important.
pollute.
And pollute. And pollute, yes, yes. And so there's that, but there's, as I mentioned, this idea that, maybe we need to hang on to some of that youthful idealism, and that these things that are that are non-tangible in the world are really what's important in the world.
Yeah. So what age group is this aimed at?
That's the hard
Everybody?
I think it's sort of, it's, you were so kind the way you described it, because I just think this is just quirky. I called it young adult, but I think any double-digit reader would be fine, and maybe even younger. Adults might enjoy it. I hope adults enjoy it. Talking animal books are always sort of problematical. Are they adults? Are they children?
Or you just fall in love with it.
Yeah.
Or you just fall in love with it. One of the things I realize is every book isn't for every person.
Right.
But an awful lot of books are great for people who maybe would stay away from it. One of the things I like that you said is that some people stumble over the technical terms, and that might, not, but that's worth struggling with. That's worth moving through to really read a beautiful story. I love William Shakespeare, and I have friends who say, I just don't know how many times have you read that play? How many times have you seen that play? I have no idea what they're talking about. But there's something when you're doing powerful storytelling, it's worth learning the words. So I think that the story sounds amazing, and we just are and you've warned us, so we're just going to dive in and enjoy it, and know that there are going to be some words that we're not sure of.
Yeah, and a lot of it doesn't really matter in the overall story.
And the overall
story.
You
know exactly what that is or not. Yeah.
That sounds really good. So do you have something you can recommend that you've read recently that you can share with our audience?
Well, so I picked a few books, and you can cut me off at any point. So one thing, and maybe I'm just more in tune to it because I have a talking animal book, Insects Are Animals, again. I've been surprised. It seems like, boy, there's a lot of talking animal books coming out lately. Maybe it's a thing, but maybe I'm just more aware of them. So one talking animal book I recently read is called Hollow Kingdom by Kira Jane Buxton. And this is a humorous book. It's post-apocalyptic, and the narrator is a very snarky crow. And he's considered a hybrid by most wild animals because he was raised by a human, and he still thinks he's part human. But the human population has become zombie-like, and they hunger after their electronic devices. But the story is that the animals are coming together despite their differences to free locked-in domestic animals and protect each other against new dangers. But it is a.
Do you have a copy of it there? I see you looking.
No, I'm.
Oh, okay.
I was looking to make sure I got her name correct.
Yes. Yes.
No, I don't have a copy.
Oh, that sounds good. And how about one more?
The library. It's an entertaining. It's humorous, at times poignant. It's just a fun book. It's a fun book.
And do you have one more?
Yeah, sure. A really beautiful book that I read earlier this year that I don't know if it's getting the attention I'd like it to get is called Greenwood by Michael Christie. It's just a beautifully crafted story, and it's a good read. And it's the story of a family. It goes through 4 generations. And it's written like you're taking a core of a tree, and the tree theme goes throughout the book. From a near future where most of the trees have withered due to climate change, and then it goes back to early 20th century where you can still find virgin forest in Canada. And then it comes back, goes back in reverse. And every generation is intimately tied to wood, from, the first generation being lumbermen to the near future is a woman who's a botanist. And it's just very lyrical and beautifully told, and an engaging story. And
Great. That sounds good. So if our watchers wanted to find you, so first of all, you can go to my website and look at her first interview, which I think you will enjoy immensely. You just type her name in the search engine, and then you can see the first interview. And if they want to find you on the web, social media, how could they find you?
well, I am very fortunate to have a name that isn't very common. So if you just look for Eva Silverfine, I have a website of that name. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and that's pretty much where you'll find me. But my website is a good place to start if you're interested.
I'm sure they're interested now that they've met you. So I'm sure they are. And we want to thank you so much for returning, or if this is the first time that you've been with us, I hope you will join us next time, next Tuesday, on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having me.